The British government has a retain and explain stance for state-owned institutions, which means contested objects, stolen objects, are kept and their context is explained. Neither the Conservative nor the Labour parties have signalled any interest in changing the current legislation. The British Museum Act of 1963 and the National Heritage Act of 1983 prevent museum trustees at some high-profile institutions from deaccessioning items in their collections. Most of the items the V&A are returning were bought at an auction on the 18th of April, 1874, at Garrett's, the London jewellers who maintain the UK's crown jewels. They include 3 heavy cast gold items known as soul washers' badges, akrakonmu, which were worn around the necks of high-ranking officials at court who were responsible for cleansing the soul of the king. Nana Oforiata Ayim told the BBC, "They're not just objects. They have spiritual importance as well. They are part of the soul of the nation. It's pieces of ourselves returning." All over the world, the Western capitalism that funds the very institutions we all work for and the countries we live in, that capitalism has been borne aloft by taking from cultures of the global majority, be it bodies and their labor, be it minerals, plant life, or traditions. We are inextricably and permanently caught up in this. And speaking for myself, the job of our lives as artists and communicators of art is to make possible the pieces of ourselves returning. It is the spiritual work, the psychological work of healing the trauma of wealth creation and the societal structures brought to bear to facilitate that creation. Global capitalism needs winners, so concurrently there must be losers. But we all lose when our humanity is trampled and disregarded at the altar of growth. So hey, I'm just an actor. Shut up already and act. Every text investigated, every design agreed upon, every score composed, every eyebrow arched, every joke delivered, all are working towards the healed soul. The great British German Jewish painter Frank Auerbach, now aged 92, was interviewed recently and said, "All art comes out of dissatisfaction." Bruce Springsteen once observed, "Behind every male artist, you'll see a little boy, arms outstretched, saying, 'Daddy, look at me, Daddy!'" Our lives are always about making sense of the circumstances of our lives. As was just said, from October 22 till October 23, I was the Cameron Mackintosh Visiting Chair of Contemporary Drama at Oxford University. The post is currently held by Artistic Director Emeritus of the RSC, Greg Doran. I held talks and workshops throughout the year of my tenure. Farah knows, she came up and joined us for a workshop, making an invitation for any students studying any discipline to come along. Particularly invited were those of colour, of the global majority, of the minority oppressed, working class, differently abled, LGBTQI. Why did I make my long list? Because the institution of Oxford University is still a bastion of Anglo-Saxon Protestant male privilege, as illustrated by the audience at the inaugural speech of the following year's chair. In a lecture hall full to bursting, this is a year after I've done a year's work on this. Apart from the waiting staff and security guards, there were only 5 people of colour in the room, and I was the only one of African heritage. I cannot tell you how dispiriting it was taking in that audience. So the work is relentless, ongoing, and exhausting. One of our leading black comedians, God knows he's been ploughing a lonely furlough for long enough, decades, Lenny Henry, had a do in Soho on Tuesday night, and I was there. He was celebrating the arrival of his new production company, Esmeralda. With his team, he'd rather brilliantly gathered actors, writers, directors, commissioning editors from Sky, UK terrestrials, streamers, and independent producers. Why? Because we are still pushing at doors that don't want to open, don't want to give agency to change the narratives of our lives, be that in education, in policy, in venture capitalism, or the creative arts. And we are tired, bored, raging, and repeat. We know the answer is to do the work and make them come to us. Listen, look at the African Cup of Nations, televising all the matches on Sky. Whoo! As my Nigerian driver said on Wednesday on the way to the airport. Hey, you see now how they want us. Hey, we have football, we have a market. And Ghana's woeful performance aside, I concur and I glory in it. But also with grief that I should need to glory in the crumbs thrown our way. We are all tired. Lenny, the cab driver, me, possibly you. Because to swim upstream is our lot. To second-guess ourselves always is our lot. Did I just get worse treatment because... Did I not get that job because... Do they think I got that job because... Am I not being heard because... Are they hearing something I am not saying because... It's exhausting. My 91-year-old Ghanaian father, once a journalist who fled to the UK because of politics in the late 1950s, has a phrase that used to make my brother and I roll our eyes wearily throughout our childhood. Keep smiling, our dad would say. Keep smiling? What kind of cheese-eating, raise the white flag pathetic statement was that? Now, I hear keep smiling as a call to arms. Retain your joy, my father meant. Retain your soul. Retain your appetite. Remain on course with your own agenda, your delight, your own curiosity at all times, in the face of all horror. Today is Holocaust Memorial Day. Last night, a human being was legally killed by being forced to inhale nitrous oxide and thrash his way to his death. Across the world, people are in rubble, disappearing under tides and lava and despair. My calling as an artist is to hold the space for hope. And sometimes that space needs holding fiercely. My lodestar text is always the superlative Toni Morrison's beloved. Baby Suggs holy in the clearing. I won't read the whole passage. We'll never get out of here, especially starting this late. It started that way. Laughing children, dancing men, crying women, and then it got mixed up. Women stopped crying and danced. Men sat down and cried. Children danced, women laughed. Children cried until exhausted and riven, all and each lay about the clearing, damp and gasping for breath. In the silence that followed, Baby Suggs, holy, offered up to them her great, big heart. She did not tell them to clean up their lives or go and sin no more. She did not tell them they were the blessed of the earth, its inheriting meek or its glory bound pure. She told them that the only grace they could have was the grace they could imagine, that if they could not see it, they would not have it. Here, she said, in this here place, we flesh that weeps, laughs, flesh that dances on bare feet in grass. Love it hard, more than lungs that have yet to draw free air, more than your life-holding womb and your life-giving private parts. Hear me now. Love your heart, for this is the prize. Keep smiling. What is the grace we can imagine? How do we keep our souls intact so we can communicate, share, and inspire that grace in the world around us? How do we return the pieces of ourselves? I return to Bruce Springsteen's observation about boys and daddies, because the longing to be seen and heard is a fundamental primary need, the fundamental primary need of a newborn baby. Know I am here and meet my needs is the longing within which we all operate as human beings throughout our lives. So this is a photograph of me at maybe 6 months with my family. There's my dad at the back. I'm sitting on the lap of my Auntie Leah, who always had a fag on the go. Before I was born, she strongly counseled my grandmother to make sure that my mother did not marry my father. She encouraged our violent grandfather to come down with his Second World War issue gun and shoot at my dad to try and make him go away. I didn't fight in the war for my daughter to marry a fucking N. That was my granddad. So there's my mummy sitting to the other side of Auntie Leah. And clearly, that's my dad up the back. And there's various cousins and aunts and uncles. I mean, look at those curtains. It was a different time, wasn't it? The 1960s. Fabulous. I love that picture so much, I can't tell you. The minute I was born, I was always on Auntie Leah's lap. She couldn't have enough of me. And here, photo number 2, I thank you, is the poster for Richard III. I mean, it's not rocket science, is it? You make the connection, right? And here, photograph number 3, I thank you, is the creative photo from Richard II that I had commissioned. Sometimes you have to fight, and sometimes you have to bathe. That's all the cast, stage management, and creatives involved in the making of Richard II. In Richard II, I wanted to address who owns the narrative of the creation of England. Well, from my introduction, you know where I'm coming from with that. Hence, we told Shakespeare's iconic love letter to England through the mouths and traditions of the colonized nations who were obliged to contribute to its flourishings. As we know, there is no industrialization, no pink flags connecting ownership and empire across the globe without the enforced joining in of people of color. In Richard III, I wanted to go from the macro to the micro, from the global majority to me. The corrosive outworkings of colonization and global capitalism ultimately led to my father's fleeing to the United Kingdom. Isn't that the ultimate Stockholm syndrome? Finding refuge in the country that caused the damage in your country, necessitating your exile. I know there are many people in this room who get that equation. Yet my father has built a life in the United Kingdom. And now we also return regularly to Ghana, where he has a house. In fact, we're going next week. Our lives are full of complexity. Picture number 4, thank you. Here are my Ghanaian, or rather Yoruba Fanti, great-grandparents. There was no Ghana then. I met my great-grandmother only once in 1976. She was well over 100 and had been busy on her pedal Singer sewing machine when we arrived. And these, photo number 5, please, are my English great-grandparents. Both died from cancer long before I was born. And here are their respective daughters, photo number 6. My mum's mum, my grandmother Jessie, whose mother was also called Jessie, and my eldest daughter is named for them. She too is Jessie. And My dad's mum, photo number 7, Mercy, my grandmother. She's actually been in 2 shows now. She was in a show about Asata Shakur that I did in 2015, and she was in Richard II. She was Richard II's father, the Black Prince. They were so stylish, these ladies. Look at those hats. I tell you, there are reasons Lady Danbury places such swagger on her hats. Photo number 8. There she be. And here, photo number 9, are the offspring of the hat ladies on their wedding day in 1962. That's my mum and dad in traditional fancy cloth. This is quite right for a wedding. They lasted 17 years, which was pretty good going considering the pressures on them. I was born in Bristol. And after a 4-year stint in Leeds, in the north of England, the land of my English, I didn't fight in the war, grandfather, and still my football team to this day, Leeds United, till I die, we moved to the rural south, and I grew up with my younger brother in the Cotswolds of the 1960s. Like Bruce, I am making arts to understand myself, and by extension, the universal application of the complexities of who we are, to understand them. Next photo, please. I was visiting my dad and stepmother in the village in the Cotswolds where I grew up, and he still lives. Yes, he is still the only African in about a 50-mile radius. He's hardcore, my dad. And I drove past this tree, stopped, reversed, took a photograph. It's blasted, but it's also in leaf. And I found it incredibly moving and a great encouragement. And it became the inspiration for the design of Richard III, set and setting. You'll see it at the end in the vid. When I describe my childhood growing up in the rural south, it is not the same as the rural south conjured perhaps by your understanding of America's history of agricultural enslavement, but some aspects hold. Isolated communities, the precarity of lives lived at the mercy of the weather, a sense of this is how we do things here, never mind what happens in your metropolises. In my village, I was always under the impression that we were stuck in the 1940s, while the rest of the nation was careering towards the 1970s. I think it was only in the early 1990s that women were allowed into the Wickwar Social Club. A writer, astonishingly, from my village, she lived at one end of the street and we at the other. Yes, it was one street with a few lanes off it. Catherine Johnson, she wrote Mamma Mia, can you believe it, in our tiny village. She reminded me of the game popular amongst adolescent boys, of punching pubescent girls hard in the breasts while shouting, "You got cancer!" Or kicking you in the back of your heels as you walked along until they bled. The trick was to ignore them. That was the revenge, and that was the dance we danced in the 1960s in the Cotswolds. So, what price the 4-year-old black child with a strong Yorkshire accent in the playground? I should say by way of explanation that my parents consciously moved us to a rural cows and sheep agricultural village because they felt our life chances as children were better there than in Bristol, where my parents met and I was born, where my father's new job was, the reason we'd moved back south. My father had ended up in Bristol in the late 1950s, where he'd met my mother, whose family had moved there from Liverpool. Beatles, still my favourite British band. Working class aesthetic, funny, curious, experimental, fantastic storytellers and composers. All day long. Logically, we should have moved to Bristol. But a port city, built and flourishing entirely on the eye-watering profits of industrialized slavery, was, and still is, riven with racist ideology. It was only after the murder of George Floyd, after years of campaigning and petitioning the council, only after that racist execution was caught on camera, that the city rose up and toppled and threw into the docks the statue of Edward Colston, a notorious slaver who with his vast fortune tried in later years to wash his image with philanthropy that saw his name on numerous public institutions, schools and concert halls, and on educational prizes that still exist to this day. They changed the name. I was born in the winter of 1962-63, the worst winter the city had experienced, and also at the tail end of a year-long bus boycott staged by Bristolians of colour and their white working-class allies. Poor people in the main, without cars, who walked for a year and through that winter, rather than use buses run by a bus company in cahoots with the transport trade unions to stop people of colour working on their buses. Would you want your daughter alone on the bus late at night with one of them darkies? The people won after a year. The bus companies and the trade unions relented. People of colour were employed, and the action of protest and solidarity led to the first race relations legislation in the United Kingdom. Nonetheless, when we were moving back down south, the local education authority in Bristol still regularly placed African heritage children in educationally subnormal schools. I was running Saturday schools for black children in the 1980s, so my parents were not having that for my brother and I, so off to the Cotswolds we went. And I assumed when I started school, age 4, that having my head smashed against the wall on an almost daily basis was just part of school life. I remember literally seeing stars and marveling at how like it was in the comics. I also started stealing money from my mum's purse to buy chocolate from the machine across the road to give to certain boys at school. Canny. And then by the time I'd moved from the infants to the juniors, I'd discovered headbutting and nail growing, and life eased off. I also discovered I was smart and could entertain extra defenses. But I loved many aspects of my childhood. I love nature. I love the seasons. I love animals. I had many good and extraordinary friends. And then punk rock came along in 1977 and saved my life. And then while studying for a law degree, as yet unfinished, I joined a black women's group in 1982, discovered that black women wrote books, packed in my law degree, joined an acting class run by an African-American woman in the group, got a job on a play of hers, and moved directly to London, to black people in Brixton. Do not pass go, do not collect £200. Heaven. Art opened my eyes. Art gave me a voice. Art gave me a purpose to tell the stories. As Baby Suggs Holy said, the only grace I could have was the grace I could imagine. And if I could not see it, I would not have it. So I set about to tell the stories and make the grace I wanted to see. And in the story of Richard III, a story I have loved since childhood, my mother was a history teacher, I reflected on my childhood. I reflected on it deeply through that story. Shakespeare is many things. But in this 400th year since the first folio was published by his friends and colleagues, I can't get past that. If a bunch of his friends hadn't gone, shit, we're going to lose those plays if we don't get them together. Friends and colleagues, they're no big overarching thing, just a bunch of people that went, whoa, hang on a minute, we better do something about this. Isn't that what life is a lot of the time? It's just a bunch of people that get together and go, whoa, whoa. Shakespeare, his flexibility and his desire to explore the human condition made his pen the perfect vehicle to carry my voice. Now, some of you may have read the hoo-ha around Michelle Terry. Well, I'm sure you've read this hoo-ha inside out by now, Will. Playing Richard III later this year at the Globe as a non-disabled character. Come on, catch up. Well, there was a little of that around our production last year. But why I wanted to play him was because my 4-year-old heart broke for another person vilified, mocked, and marginalized because of the happenstance of their birth. What had that, the look of him, to do with his small child's soul? What had that to do with his character? Shakespeare gives us a person, if you care to look for it, who is in his opening conversation with the audience, making a plea to be seen for who he is and not what he looks like. He is broken by the prejudices and indignities heaped upon him. His first instinct is to be a lover, and when that is denied him, he becomes what everyone expects of someone who looks like him. He becomes a villain. He says, "But I that am not shaped for sportive tricks, nor made to court an amorous looking glass, I that am rudely stamped, and want love's majesty to strut before a wanton ambling nymph, I that am curtailed of this fair proportion, cheated of feature by dissembling nature, deformed, unfinished, sent before my time into this breathing world, scarce half made up, and that so lamely and unfashionable that dogs bark at me as I halt by them. Why I, in this weak, piping time of peace, have no delight to pass away the time, unless to see my shadow in the sun and descant on mine own deformity. And therefore, since I cannot prove a lover to entertain these fair, well-spoken days, I am determined to prove a villain and hate the idle pleasures of these days." Opening conversation with the audience. He's straight in there. Come on, we all want to get in the bar. Written in 1592 to 1593. Child me reasoned. Who was on the throne? Elizabeth I. Who was her grandfather? Henry VII. Who did Henry, aka Richmond, defeat to become king? Richard III. Well then, I thought, stands to reason. Shakespeare has to make Richard out as a baddie to keep Queen Elizabeth sweet, keep the Queen sweet, stay in work, stay in favour. But it's not fair, my child self declared. That's not who Richard is. And a lifelong love was born. My own sense of it's not fair, of being judged and othered for my appearance, chiming with my perceived sense of Richard's it's not fair. In Shakespeare's story, I heard my own. So I wanted to have a look at what happens when the punch down upon punch back. How the othering and abuse of a person because of their outward physical appearance can wear away at a soul to that person's own detriment. Bless. Don't blame you. How a person's othering wears away at their soul to their own detriment is the water I was curious to swim in this play. What happens when the pathologized one punches up? I ask this question on my own behalf, but also for all people whose life experience finds some resonance in this story. And so the deformity I experienced in my growing up was being black in an all-white environment. And so that is how I cast the show. The pathologizing of the body, the ascribing of malevolence to its occupant, according to some societal norm, is something differently abled people have certainly labored under forever. It is also something that black people in white privileged societies have experienced since industrial slavery became the norm for wealth creation in Europe and latterly the Americas. And in our production, we also had 3 differently abled performers not playing Richard, but freely just being a character with no regard to physicality. Because our Richard was set in my childhood experience, I also set it in the Cotswolds, with the traditional rural cultural traditions of Morris dancing and folk singing. But in keeping with the universal application utility of Shakespeare's plays, I looked at the universal in these rural idioms. Photographs number 11, please. There we are. In the Morris dancer's costume, I saw the East African spirit talkers. Number 12. And all land people have a tradition of stick dancing. Number 13. Number 14. And in the English tradition of Morris dancing, the white shirt and trousers are very reminiscent of the tunic and leggings of many cultures around the world, the traditional shalwar kameez style found across South Asia, East Asia, Africa, the Americas, and medieval Northern Europe. So this became the basic costume for our company. On a side note, Morris dances, as a name, are often believed to be a corruption of the form Moorish dancers. The Moors, as we know, being peoples of African heritage who were found across and ruling in parts of Europe until their mass expulsions. At a lecture at Cornell, activist, critical thinker, writer, and filmmaker Tariq Ali observed, "The fall of the Kingdom of Granada in 1492 coincided with the expulsion of Jews from Catholic Spain, while the Muslims were expelled in 1526. With these ethnic cleansings and forced conversions in place, a single identity Europe was created. And yet, some traditions embedded themselves in the culture and remain. Morris dancing. When we dig down, land people across the world celebrate the seasons and the gods of harvest. We all dance, we sing, we bang sticks, and pray to the gods for a fruitful future. In the opening of Our Richard, we see the fruitful, newly victorious King Edward celebrated. I had to think then. Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this son of York. That's how Richard opens the show. Everything is on the up now that Edward is in the ascendancy. And so we celebrate with May wreaths and maypole dancing, a great English tradition, here used in the act of celebrating while bullying. "Oh, and she don't mind, we're only having a laugh. She's one of us," was the tone I was aiming for from the crowd. That hectoring, collegiate doublespeak feels very much of a piece in this play, and the language sings in my childhood accent. An accent, we are told, that was very close to what Shakespeare would have heard around him growing up. It's an accent that gets mocked as the stupid people voice, of the country bumpkin voice, but it can smile while stabbing you in the eye and then claim ignorance of the act. "Oh, I'm so sorry, my love. Did I get you in the eye? I didn't mean to. Never mind, you'll be all right." It's also the language of Tyndale's Bible, an early modern English translation by William Tyndale made between 1522 and 1535. It would have been hugely popular in Shakespeare's day, predating as it did the now more popular King James Bible, and thus its rural imagery and vernacular would have been rich territory for Shakespeare to incorporate in his work. Richard tells the audience at one moment when he's outlining his plan for getting rid of his brothers, "But yet I run before my horse to market." It's a particular favourite of mine. Next picture, please. No, we've missed one. Oh, did it not come up? Oh. Didn't transfer? No. Oh, well, I've got a lovely picture here of, I'll just show you, you won't be able to see it, of, this is Tyndale's monument. Can you see it? And that's quite near where I grew up. It was a popular Sunday afternoon walk. It was built in honor of William Tyndale, who translated that Bible, and he was born nearby. So Tyndale, who translated that Bible, which would have been a great fund for Shakespeare, was born down the road from where I grew up. So all roads lead to Shakespeare in that accent, in my opinion. The greatest stories allow us to see ourselves in them, allow us to see the stories of others, and in this story, allow me to see my story. My father sang in folk groups all through my childhood. We travelled to many folk clubs to hear him. And when I think of folk music, I think of this lady. I think of the stories of working people in song. And I especially think of Odetta, an African-American singer, a wonderful singer, a huge influence on the young Bob Dylan, and a fixture in my childhood listening. Like my dad and my grandmother Mercy in her fancy cloche hat, she was a guitarist in a palm court orchestra in Cape Coast in the 1920s, let me tell you. My brother is a musician, and so he composed the music and MD'd the show for me, for Richard III. All the lyrics for the songs are taken from the text by me and set to music by my brother Yofi. He knew the terrain, geographic and psychic. I love his music. He knew the folk idiom I was after, and I got to winkle him out of LA to be by my side for a few months. And I mention his presence beyond creativity for the grounding it gave me. Although my childhood was overwhelmingly white, my creative life, when I've had the agency, has been overwhelmingly not. And to conceive, edit, direct, and perform in an all-white company of lovely actors, many of whom I've worked with before and since, was a psychologically challenging moment for me. It was not nothing. Loathed by his mother, the language of not love from a mother who frequently refers to him as thou toad is painful. It was painful for me to play. Richard roars on at one moment. "Who intercepts my expedition?" His mother replies, "Oh, she that might have intercepted thee by strangling thee in her accursed womb." She goes on, "Art thou so hasty? I have stayed for thee, God knows, in torment and in agony." Richard says, "And came I not at last to comfort you?" She replies, "Thou camest on earth to make the earth my hell. What comfortable hour canst thou name that ever graced me with thy company?" And he replies, "If I be so disgracious in your eye, let me march on and not offend you, madam. Strike up the drum." He's heartbroken. He's hungry for love, to be seen worthy of love. It's why I have him genuinely fall in love with Anne. And why not? It's in the text. After he's wooed her, in amongst everything else he says to us is his astonishment. He says, "My dukedom to a beggarly denier. I do mistake my person all this while. Upon my life, she finds, although I cannot, myself to be a marvellous, proper man. Albeit charges for a looking glass and entertain a score or two of tailors to study fashions to adorn my body. But first I'll turn yon fellow in his grave and then return, lamenting, to my love." And I have him sing, "Shine out, fair sun, till I have bought a glass, that I may see my shadow as I pass." He's thrilled. Suddenly he can look at himself. Suddenly he's lovable, he's viewable, he's attractive. The transformation of love. The astonishment of the unloved to find themselves loved and lovable, I find so moving in this play. Shakespeare wrote it, and yet so often it is overlooked in the rush to play the evil, warped genius. Sometimes it's about the lens of the viewer, and the lens of the player. That's why my production company is called Swinging the Lens. I want to speak to the overlooked, to those whose lens has been disregarded or not even considered to exist. This meant that for some in the company, it was a challenge at first to understand the stakes of the work in a way I have not experienced in a cast of colour. The performances were heartfelt, generous, fabulous, but it required an adjustment of assumptions on my part as director not to rely on a shorthand I might have previously used. It was also of interest to me that the response to reowning a vernacular and a tradition, an English tradition, not usually associated with the global majority, especially when staged in such a simple travelling playaway, took a while. I wanted the clarity of the text and the relationships to be preeminent, like a griot or a storyteller in the village square engaged in palava beneath a mango tree. And for some audiences with a certain expectation of Shakespeare and who does it how, it took them a minute to get it. For me, the broad theatricality of Shakespeare for the people was my friend. It's a funny play, a gory play, a tender play, full of love and betrayal, and a longing to be seen and heard. That's what I lent into. I like doing that. I love pantomime as a tradition. I like big and bold, and then small and intense. I want to pull an audience in. I mean, come on, I'm preaching to the choir here, but if you're on stage and you're performing and there's bear baiting going on outside, people shagging over there, people doing deals over there, you better get them hard or they're going to wander off and do something else. And I always think about that with Shakespeare, that he got that thing about you've got to grab them in and then keep them, you know? So I'm in the process, as I said, of editing a film of the stage performance of our show. And I had hoped to send you all a Vimeo link of the finished article in advance of this evening's chat. But life got hectic as it does, and we have a little way to go yet. So in the meantime, to close, I have a short and polished series of extracts to just give you a sense of where we went with our Richard III, what I've been talking about this evening, how I endeavoured to pull that story into a heart space, into a space of being in conversation with people. So we're going to do that now. It's about 15, 20 minutes long. If you need to pee, I'm sorry. I mean, should we do that? Should people go for a pee first, or should we just show it? What's the consensus? Show it? Okay, I salute you. Thank you.
Upon our hats, in the deep bosom of the ocean, buried. Now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious our bruised arms hung up for monuments, our stern alarms changed to merry meetings, our dreadful marches to delightful measures. Grim-visaged war hath smoothed his wrinkled front, and now, instead of mounting barbed steeds to fight the souls of fearful adversaries, he capers nimbly in a lady's chamber to the lascivious pleasings of the news. Sportive tricks, nor made to court an amorous looking-glass. I that am rudely stamped, and want love's majesty to strut before a wanton ambling nymph. I that am curtailed of this fair proportion, cheated of feature by dissembling nature, deformed, unfinished, sent before my time into this breathing world scarce half made up. And that so lingy and unfashionable the dogs bark at me as I halt by them. Why I in this weak piping time of peace have no delight to pass away the time, unless to see my shadow in the sun and descant on mine own deformities. And therefore, since I cannot prove a lover to entertain these fair, well-spoken days, I am determined to prove a villain and hate the idle pleasures of these days. Plots have I laid, inductions dangerous by drunken prophecies, libels, and dreams, to set my brothers Clarence and the King in deadly hate, the one against the other. And if King Edward be as true and just as I am subtle, false, and treacherous, this day shall Clarence closely be walled up about prophecy, which says that G of Edward's heirs the murderer shall be. Thy thoughts, down to my soul, here, Clarence comes.
Arise, dissembler. Though I wish thy death, I will not be the executioner.
Then bid me kill myself, and I will do it.
I have already.
Now within thy rage, speak it again, and with the word, this hand which for thy love did kill thy love, shall for thy love kill a far truer love.
I would I knew thy heart.
'Tis figured on my tongue.
I fear me both are false.
And never was man true.
Well, I'll put up your sword.
Say then my peace is made.
That shalt thou know hereafter.
Shall I live in hope?
All men, I hope, live so.
Vouchsafe to wear this ring.
To take is not to give.
Look, how my ring encompasseth thy finger. Even so thy breast encloses my poor heart. were both of them, for both of them are thine. And if thy poor devoted servant neighbour beg one favour at thy gracious hand, thou dost confirm his happiness forever.
What is it?
That it may please you leave these sad designs to him that have more cause to be a mourner, and presently repair to Crosby House, where after I have solemnly interred at Chertsey Monastery this noble king, wet his grave with my repentant tears, I shall with all expedient duty see him. I do beseech you, grant me this boon.
With all my heart. And much it joys me too to see you are become so penitent.
Bid me farewell.
It is more than you deserve. But since you teach me how to flatter you, imagine I've said farewell already.
Make peace with God, for you must die, my lord.
My friend, I spy some pity in thy looks. Or then I do not a flatter.
Mind, my lord!
Take that! Oh! And if all this will not do, we'll drown you the mousy butts within! No! To the block, bear him to my head, then smile at me that shortly shall be dead.
Religious men are at their beads, 'tis much to draw them thence, so sweet is zealous contemplation.
See, where his grace stands between two clergymen.
2 drops of virtue to stay him from the fall of vanity, and see in his hand a book of prayer. True ornaments to know a holy man. Famous Plantagenet, most virtuous prince, lend favourable ears to our request, and pardon us the interruption of thy devotion and right Christian zeal.
My lords, cousin of Buckingham,
my gracious sovereign,
give me thy hand. Vassal, by thy advice and thy assistance is King Richard seated. But tell me where these glories for a day, or shall they last and we rejoice in them?
Still live they, and forever let them last.
Buckingham, now do I play the touch, to try if thou be current gold indeed. young Edward lives. Think now what I would speak.
Say on, my loving lord.
Why, Buckingham, I say I would be king.
Why, so you are, my thrice-renowned lord.
Am I king? 'Tis so, but Edward lives.
True, noble prince.
Oh, bitter consequence that Edward still should live, true noble prince. Cousin, thou shalt wont to be so dull. Shall I be plain? I wish the bastard's dead, and I would have it suddenly performed. What sayst thou now? Speak suddenly, be brief.
Your grace may do your pleasure.
Tut, tut. Thou art all ice. Thy kindness freezes. Say, have I thy consent that they should die?
Give me some little breath, some pause, dear lord. Before I positively speak in this, I will resolve you herein presently.
None are for me. I, reaching Buckingham, grow circumspect. No more shall he be neighbour to my counsels. Hath he so long held out with me untired, and stops he now for breath? Well, be it so. What canst thou swear by now? Day, yield me not thy light, nor night thy rest. Be opposite all planets of good luck to my proceedings, if with dear heart's love I tender not thy princely, beauteous daughter. Therefore, my mother, I must call you so. Plead what I will be. Not what I have been, not my deserts, but what I will deserve, and be not peevish fond in great designs. Shall I be tempted of the devil thus? Aye, if the devil tempt you to do good. Shall I forget myself to be myself? Aye, if yourself's remembrance wrong yourself. Yet thou didst kill my children in your daughter's womb. I bury them, where in that nest of spicery they shall breed cells of themselves for your recomfiture. Shall I go win my daughter to thy will, and be a happy mother by the deed? I go. Write to me very shortly, and you shall understand from me her mind. Bear her my true love's kiss, and so farewell. Relenting fool! Shallow, changing woman!
Thou quiet soul, sleep, thou quiet sleep. Dream of success and happy victory. Thy adversary's wife doth pray for thee.
Richard, thy wife, that wretched and thy wife that never slept a quiet hour with thee, now fills thy sleep with perturbations. Despair and die!
And good angels fight on Richmond's side. and Richard falls in height of all his pride. The first was I that helped thee to the crown, the last was I that felt thy tyranny. Oh, in the battle think on Buckingham, and die in terror of thy guiltiness. Despairing, yield thy breath, despair and die, and Richard falls in higher on his pride. And men take they did but dream. Oh, coward conscience, how thou dost afflict me. I think there be 6 Richmonds in the field. 5 have I slain today instead of him. A horse! A horse! I came for a horse!
Friends, the day is ours, the bloody dog is dead. Now civil wounds are stopped, peace lives again, that she may long live here. God say, Amen.
Now civil wounds are stopped, peace lives again. That she may long live here, God say Amen. Amen.
I shall despair, there's no creature loves me, and if I die, no soul shall pity me. I shall despair.
Now civil wounds are stopped,
There's no creature loves me,
peace lives again.
and if I die,
That she may long live here,
no soul shall pity me.
God say Amen. God say Amen.
I shall despair.
Peace
No
again.
Adjoa, thank you so much for taking us on such a personal, intimate, profoundly, intimate journey into your own experience. What we've been talking about all day is how we rise from trauma. And you just gave us a perfect demonstration of the way in which art making, producing theater, actually does that. So I want to thank you for your talk. Are you here?
No, I'm fine. I'll just make sure.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask one question, and then I'm going to ask the audience to ask questions for a couple of minutes. And then we're going to have to stop. But the first question I wanted to ask is related to this production.
Yeah.
I wondered if you wanted to say something about the music, because I know how personal and meaningful that was, because it was your brother who composed it.
Yeah, I mean, my brother's a musician. He lives in LA. I was his older sister, so of course I forced all his musical choices through his childhood. Your first album will be Aladdin Sane, and when you're 8. I don't know if you'd have chosen that. But because our dad was in folk bands, and because music was a huge part of our childhood, I knew I wanted Yofi to write the music. I knew he would get everything because he had the same childhood I did. I mean, I think older siblings have a different one because you'll sort of always look at the older siblings nodding because you're always forging that bit of the path. But he knew what I was talking about. And musically, we are, we're quite sympathetic. So that refrain you hear at the end, the do, 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 I actually dreamt that. I was buying a house, and I thought about buying this flat. It was at the top of a building, and had amazing views over the sea in Sussex, where my husband's from, where we live. And then I started having dreams, and in the dream, I was in my mum's garden. I was little, and it was one of those early morning summer's day when all the light is refracted through trees. So I sort of got that magic quality to it. And as I was standing and walking through the garden, I heard that music in my head. And that was for me, that was my spirit saying, live on the ground. Never mind your high rise, live on the ground. So anyway, then one day I walked into the house that I now live in, and as I walked through the door, the music started playing in my head. So it was like, that one is that one. So I was telling Yofi about it, and it just felt very personal and connected and very sweet. And so I used that music. Sorry, the sound quality wasn't great, but I use that music when he falls in love with Anne, and then I bring that music back at the end when he's dead and his spirit's going back to the tree. That's what was kind of in my head. So Yofi composed the music, and then when he gave me the final track, he went, "I've put your voice on it," because I'd sung it into my phone to send him to LA. So it's just stuff like that. He kind of gets it, and he has worked with some amazing musicians over his lifetime in the States, and so he got lots of them to play. He recorded it in LA, and he got lots of them to play on it. So it was a sort of, it felt like the love got extended. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask for one or two questions. So whoever gets their hand up first is very, very lucky. Yes.
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful, everything that you shared is really beautiful. That one of the things that struck me as somebody who works on healing as a way to promote inclusion, I was thinking about you talking about parts of us coming back. And one of the things I encourage is trusting like when you have something like a music comes to you in a dream, like trusting it as something that can be healing, not only for you, but for others. And so I was wondering, I think about what we need, a kind of a radical reimagination that we need. Did you have to learn to trust that? I think that's my question. Those moments of artistic expression that come to you.
I think I'm 75 million years old now, so I think I got into my 50s, which for young ears I'll call my flip it 50s. And I felt free. I just kind of went, there are lots of things about us that are innate. Like for me, the thing I said earlier about a newborn baby needs to be seen and heard. And all, the millennia of human evolution that's the thing. And similarly, we are given certain instincts in life. And if you can clear away the decks of the stuff that you've been obliged to learn and listen to that instinct, you are given that instinct for the body to survive. So as I get older, more and more I'm trusting my instincts. When you you've never met somebody before and you meet them and you're like, you're good people. I lean into that now. Or you're with somebody and you think, I think I should swerve you. I lean into that now. Because this instinct, it's not about make friends. It's about how does that innate electrical set of impulses keep this flesh and blood going. So I really do trust instincts now, and I'm kind of glorying in it. It's like when I was pregnant and I just kind of switched my head off and went, this body has been doing this for millennia. You just need to shut up and let your body do what it does. It's built to procreate. That's how the species is built for it. So just trust it. If it says suck coal, suck coal. Whatever. It didn't. It said eat fish. And I was a vegetarian, but my body said eat fish, so I did. But yeah, so I think we forget at our peril that we are basically animals, and that there is an atavistic level at which we all can function incredibly well if we just lean into it. And I think we get excited about our technology, and you've got these things here which blow my mind. Is it Waymo? Waymo? It's Waymo. I was coming in from the airport. I was like, what on earth is that? Where is the driver? Oh, so, the world of technology is extraordinary, but all the fundamental things are still the fundamental things. And I think, we should celebrate them and not take them as, something that we need to move on from. Sorry, that was long.
Another question. Yes, over there. Can we get a...
Good evening. Thank you very much for everything. So my question is about what you said earlier regarding just the process of, I think it was how it can be boring and then daunting and exhausting and then rinse and repeat. And I'm curious about how you mark progress, especially if you're doing this over like decades, right? I think it's an intergenerational struggle in a sense, because you've done this for decades. We're doing this in different spaces. I'm working in development, but at the end of the day, the spirit behind the work is the same thing. Mm-hmm. And so I'm trying to think about how to mark progress when you're working on issues that don't give you like results in like the immediate future, if you know what I mean. Some of these things are just things that you're going to work on for the rest of your life, if any. And so how do you like stay grounded and stay motivated and come to it every time, hoping that this will be the time that change happens?
So the question about what are the integers of progress that you see, and how do you stay grounded when you're working and you're not seeing enough progress? I suppose I was having a hilarious conversation the other day. I can't remember who it was with, but we were going, honestly, the young people today, they don't get how hard it was for us. They just swan in here, just doing what they want, getting shows on, all this sort, And I was like, yes, you are officially an old git. But, I imagine that, our ancestors 2,000 years ago were saying exactly the same thing. But in that old person ranty frame, I suppose there is also the thrill of being able to go, do you know what? They don't pause for thought. They just stride in and go, no, I'm expecting this. Here's what I can do. What can you offer me? Okay, thank you. Or that's not good enough, I'll go somewhere else. Where we'd have gone, thanks very much for the opportunity. Can I sit down? Well, I've had this, sorry, is this taking up too much of it? Do you know what I mean? There's a different sense of what is available, what people are worthy of, and what they're entitled to. It doesn't mean that you get it, but even having the sense. I was thinking back to, there was a black comedian called Charlie Williams in the UK. Charlie Williams did the working men's clubs in the 1940s and 50s in the north of England. I mean, he was a lone star out there on his own. He would tell jokes about, against himself, about his race, all sorts of stuff. And when I was coming up, it was like, oh, Charlie Williams, I mean, really? And now you go, I salute your courage for even standing up there in the first place. It's incremental. Charlie Williams did it so that then my friend Lenny Henry could come along, and now there's younger comedians coming through, and everybody is standing on, I know it's the cliche, but it's the cliche because cliches are things that are true. Everyone is standing on the shoulders of everybody else. So I try to do I am a hippie from the Cotswolds, let's not forget. I try to do the things of going, what are the things I have to be grateful for today? What are the slight movements in a progressive way that are opening I'm all about opening the doors wider. It's like we're on a burning ball of gas in the middle of a solar system, and we are going to blink and then we'll be dead. So it's like, be in your life, appreciate every day of your life. I've turned into the person who watches birds a lot now. I have a birdsong app. Why? Because there's a whole other world going on another level out there. They look at us and we're like this sort of lumpy, bumpy thing while they're just... So I try to lean into the joy, and I try to lean into those incremental little wins that you get. I don't want to eat the elephant, but you know what I mean? It's eating the elephant one bite at a time. I find a better analogy. But because it's important for you to stay encouraged. Because if you're not encouraged, you can't do the work. And your life is supposed to be joy. All this other stuff is putting food on the table. But your life is supposed to be joy. My dream would be for us to live as soul people. And what I mean by that is that the motivation of our soul would be our guiding light. That it wouldn't be, I'm from this tribe or this race or this gender identified or this socioeconomic, for everybody. For the wealthiest, poshest, exclusive person to the least powerful, least person with agency. We should, to live in our soul's joy would be my heart's delight. And that takes hard work, because you have to push a lot of shit out the way. But that's the goal, because this is a precious thing we have, this life. And we should be able to be in company and in communion with each other at a soul level as well. Because hiving us off into these silos, that's not us, that's society's bag. And I will work very hard to militate against that and keep smiling as I do it. Because you go to a funeral, somebody's dead. It's done, it's gone, it's finished. The electricity goes out of a person and they're just a lump of meat. Seriously, so I've worked as a bereavement counsellor, right? And so when you're in it, be in it. Grab it hard. That's all I can tell you.
I've been given the signal that we can have one more question.
Sorry, it's so late. I'm so sorry.
In the back, yes.
My goodness, thank you so much. This has been really wonderful, and I'm a little overwhelmed to have the last question. You began with that beautiful tree in the Cotswolds that was blasted, but in leaf. And then at the end of your play, Richard reaches up his hands and returns to the tree. Do you want to say something about the importance of the non-human, even your birds? I recently this year started watching birds too. Do you want to say something about the non-human as part of this work of rising?
Yeah. Well, we're all. I am with Joni Mitchell. We're stardust. We all are. We're all just different iterations of carbon, like the carpet, me. Farah, all of you. We're all essentially the same things, just smudged together in different ways. So I love trees. I love trees. There's I have a skirt. I have so this dress. Oh, there's my bra. Sorry about that. This dress. This dress is made by a Ghanaian designer. She has a design called Red Cotton. And one of the dresses she gave me has a Gan saying on it. Gan is the tribe around Accra. And I don't barely speak my own language. I certainly don't speak Gan. But essentially what it says is one tree can be blown over in the wind, but many trees together stand firm. And I think of it as a sort of, obviously it's a thing for life and solidarity, but the trees, they have relationships with each other, they talk to each other. Trees put the oxygen back in the air, they give us shade, they give us fruit. You know, I'm all about the tree. In fact, I'm the patron of a charity called Tree Aid. I'm going to visit one of their projects in Ghana next week. And what they do is they plant trees in the Sahel region, which is the desert area across the central belt of Africa, to try and mitigate against the encroachment of environmental catastrophe. Trees hold the soil together. You know, it's just nourishment. I mean, what's not to love with a tree? So, and for me, I have found it a very grounding thing in my life. I love to look at trees. I love to walk through trees. My favorite light since I was a tiny kid was the sunlight that comes through trees, like when you're in a green cathedral. Nature is our friend. You know, when you're having a hard day, just lean into nature, and it's restorative, because it reminds you of how small and passing we are, and to just take the weight off yourself. Lay your burden down for a minute and just look at a tree or follow the arc of a bird in the sky. That's all I can say.
Adjoa, you're such an important voice in this work. So on behalf of Race4Race, I want to thank you for your generosity and for being here tonight.
It's been a real honor and a privilege. Thank you.